happy Friday, everybody. And remember, it's Red Friday, so wear a red shirt or something red so we can remember everyone deployed. Today's red shirt that I'm wearing was the one I got, I'm holding up the wrong side here, from Denise's Orchid Paradise. So today's shirt is sponsored by Denise, and I thank you very much, Denise, for a beautiful shirt. If you didn't see the whole thing, then you might want to go back to my mail call 2 videos ago. Last video was sweet and sour meatballs, but on the weekend I put up a video doing a mail call and showed the shirt. I'm not going to stand up and turn around because all you'd see is my backside because I'm sitting in a chair. Anyway, beautiful shirt, love it. It says One Nation Under God. I don't know if you can see that or not. And it has the same logo on the back, only bigger. And thank you very much, Denise, for a beautiful shirt. And I wear it with pride, remembering Denise, but also in honor of all those deployed in our military, our first responders, etc., during this stressful time in our lives. Alrighty, our shout out for today goes to Summer's Place. Fun channel, wonderful lady, really should check her out. I know she'd appreciate some support. And she does a vlog on all sorts of good fun stuff. But check out Summer's Place. And we're going to do a second shout out to Frank and Tina. So check out Frank and Tina as well. They homestead and do all kinds of interesting fun things. So check out those 2 places, Summer's Place and Frank and Tina. Alrighty. I'll put links to those in the down here in the description box. I can't seem to get my directions straight. Alrighty. It's story time. And it's chapter 5 of Robin Hood today. How Guy of Gisborne came home from Sherwood Forest. Let's get to it, shall we? Guy of Gisborne had never forgotten the injury Robert of Locksley had done him. That humiliating ride back to St. Mary's Abbey, tied with his face to his horse's tail, still made him gnash his teeth with rage. He had sworn, sooner or later, to take that insolent outlaw and hang him. Maid Marian, in her room, heard the warlike preparations in the abbey courtyard below, and trembled. Through the small iron bar window, she saw the horsemen in armor, the crossbowmen, the soldiers with their pikes and swords ready to set forth. What could a small group of foresters, armed with bows and arrows and quarterstaffs, do against such a deadly army? Poor Robin was, as the abbot himself jeeringly told her, as good as lost. Sir Guy thought so too. This time he was taking no chances. He had gathered together more than 100 men, and he meant to beat the forest until he had found the fox's lair. He boasted that before night fell, Robin Hood would be hanging by the neck from the abbey gates. The poor folk of the neighborhood watched the procession with heavy hearts. They had not found the fox of Sherwood Forest to be dangerous. In fact, most of them had been befriended by Robin Hood's band at some point or another. Hungry families often found an unexpected shoulder of venison in their kitchens when they came back from laboring in the fields. Hard-pressed tenant farmers who were unable to pay their rent to the abbot sometimes discovered a gold coin or 2 waiting for them. Everyone knew Robin Hood was the author of these good deeds, and many an elderly widow or sick child had reason to bless him in their prayers. Needless to say, Robin Hood knew all about the army Sir Guy was leading against him. He knew exactly how many there were, how they were armed, and the point where they planned to enter the forest. Half the peasants in Nottinghamshire were his willing spies. Sir Guy's men entered the forest at dawn. The grey light hardly yet penetrated the heavy leaves, and all was unnaturally still. The mounted men rode boldly forward, followed by the bowmen on foot. They had gone scarcely 100 yards when their leader gave a shout. He saw a bright sword lying squarely in the middle of the path. "The scoundrels have heard us coming," he cried, "and taken to their heels, leaving weapons behind them like the cowards they are." He got down from his horse to pick up the sword. A voice from somewhere suddenly cried, Leave that alone, Hubert. Now the man's name actually was Hubert, and he jumped at the sound. The trouble was he couldn't understand where the voice came from. Recovering from his astonishment, he reached down again. Leave that alone, Hubert. Who is it? Hubert cried. Where are you? Here, came a voice from the left. No, here, came another from the right. Here, here, called a third voice, apparently from somewhere overhead. Sir Guy and his men stared around them in wonder. There was no one to be seen. Hubert, angry, grasped for the sword again. This time there were no voices, but the sword began to move along the path of its own accord. It's bewitched, Hubert stammered. Bewitched fiddlesticks, Sir Guy shouted. It's a trick of some sort. After it, you fool. Sir Guy, of course, was right. It was a trick. Robin Hood had merely tied a long piece of string to the sword, which he had looped around a tree trunk and tugged from the shelter of a thick bush. But as Hubert stared at the disappearing sword, the woodland around him was suddenly filled with weird laughter. It seemed to be alive with voices, yet no one was in sight. Robin Hood's men were all trained foresters. They knew how to move so stealthily that even the wild deer scarcely heard them coming. Dressed in Lincoln green, they were nearly invisible among the leaves of the trees. They knew every clump of bushes and every tree in the forest, and they could travel from limb to limb as swiftly as monkeys. The army marched forward, deeper into the forest, urged on by Sir Guy's furious cursing. The strange, high-pitched laughter followed them. It came from all sides, but they caught sight of no one. The forest is haunted, the men started whispering among themselves, and they began to wish they were 100 miles from the place. The path grew narrower, so they had to break into smaller groups and go in single file. Every now and then the last man in the file would give a sudden yell. The leader would glance around just in time to see the poor fellow whisked up into a tree, dangling at the end of a rope. By the time the others had rushed back to help, the man had always vanished. In this way, 10 or 15 of Sir Guy's men disappeared before nightfall. Where had they gone to? Nobody knew. But the superstitious soldiers began to murmur and grumble. They thought their invisible enemies could only be wood sprites or tree goblins. Sir Guy found it hard to stop them from sneaking away in panic. At dusk, they came to a bridge across a swiftly running stream. Sir Guy was halfway across the bridge when the 2 logs which supported the boarding of the bridge slowly began to roll away, each in the opposite direction. The boarding sagged, and Sir Guy's horse reared. It threw him into the middle of the river. Sir Guy would have sunk to the bottom in his heavy steel armor and drowned had not strong arms dragged him out again. He stood sputtering at his rescuers. He saw a giant of a man laughing at him. It was Little John. Beside the giant, a handsome youth politely pretended to help dry his dripping suit of mail. It was Will Scarlet. But the merry blue eyes of the man who stood between them were what sent the blood into Sir Guy's cheeks. "It's Robin Hood!" he shouted furiously. "Kill him, men! 40 pieces of gold to the one who kills him!" "Poor chap," said Will Scarlet kindly. "He's beginning to talk to himself." Little John tapped his forehead with a beefy forefinger. "Touched, I fear," he said with sympathy. Robin said, "He'll never find his way out of the forest in his present state of mind. We'd better give him an escort." Sir Guy continued to rage, shouting for his men. Slowly he began to understand why the 3 in Lincoln green were smiling at him. Sir Guy of Gisborne's entire army had fled in fear and terror. Not one of them had stayed to rescue his master. It was a long time before any man of that day's army dared to venture into Sherwood Forest again. The 20 or so men who had disappeared during the day all turned up again, safe and sound, except for a painful thrashing and a good dunking in the river. Guy of Gisborne also returned to the abbey unharmed. He had been given an escort, as Robin promised, an escort dressed in Lincoln green. And he came back on his own horse. He came back as he had come back months ago from Locksley, back to front. The poor folk who had watched that morning's procession so sadly lined the road for Sir Guy's homecoming. They laughed until the tears ran down their faces, seeing the proud Norman knight come home so humbly. So there we are, Chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed that. And Chapter 6, next Friday, is How Friar Tuck Joined the Band. So that should be good. Everybody loves Friar Tuck, huh? Alrighty. So there we go. All right. Are you ready for it? It's coming, whether you want it or not. If you can't handle it, you better turn your video off now, because it's time for the groaner. Well, a doctor walked into an examining room at his office one morning to find a nicely dressed young man sitting in a chair, waiting for him. And the doctor said hello, and the young fellow said good morning. The doctor says, now what can I do for you today? Are you feeling all right? And the young fellow says, oh, I'm perfectly healthy. I'm fine. Nothing wrong with me. Oh, then why are you here? The young fellow says, I just wanted to come and tell you thank you so much for your treatment. I've benefited from it greatly. And the doctor looks at him. He says, but you're not a patient of mine. I've never seen you before. And the young fellow says, oh, you're absolutely right. I'm not a patient of yours. But my Uncle Fred was a patient of yours, and he died, and I'm his heir. There you go. Hope you enjoyed today's little time and the fun with Guy of Gisborne. Poor fella. That's what happens when you let your anger and your rage rule your life. And you want your desire for revenge instead of just enjoying life and being friends with everybody. So there's a lesson. Better to be a Robin Hood than a Guy of Gisborne. Alrighty, until next Tuesday, when we'll be doing something fun in the kitchen. I haven't decided what we're going to do this time. I know the last 2 weeks I've told you ahead of time, but haven't decided what I'm going to do yet, so I can't tell you. But it'll be something enjoyable. So until then, take care, stay safe, and have a wonderful weekend. God bless.